love to come to a city and sort of get the feel of it. This is great. I mean, right now during the festival, it's so book loving, everybody carrying books, which I see on the subway so much. But people are really friendly, and I respond to that because I feel that way about New York too. I never like to write about myself. I never like to really write fully about my life. It would be very boring. I have to live my life, so I don't really want to write it. But you write about things that you see and feel, and you kind of stow them away and wait for the right time, and suddenly you're like, oh, I remember that feeling. Now is the time to use it. Sometimes it sits there in part of your brain for 10, 20 years, and then you have a memory. We're so resourceful about pulling things up that have meaning later on. Oh, definitely. You try to not imitate it, but give an essence of it. Because if you just listen to a full conversation on a bus and you put it in a book, like exactly as it was, it might not be interesting. You want to take almost like the bouillon cube of it. Like you want to take the essence of something and make it, so that seems to people more representative of what conversations between those people might be like, rather than having to listen to people's conversation. It may be that things haven't changed because what we wrote a long time ago remains relevant today, or even in the case of The Handmaid's Tale, much more frighteningly relevant today. And in the case of The Wife, I published it in 2003. And the movie took 14 years to get made. And by the time it got made, we were in the Me Too moment and things were different. And I think Glenn Close's performance in particular, which was filled with a kind of quiet rage, spoke to a lot of people in a way that, not any of the ideas were new, obviously, because the books were written a long time ago, but we've all been thinking about these things. I think what's different now is the world has changed and the conversations around some of these issues are fiercer and more and sharper and are getting listened to more. That's cool. What a novel can do. My friend, the novelist Mary Gordon, said the novel is the opposite of the tweet. And I think that's really true. It's why I want to write novels, because they take their time. I mean, if you put a tweet out into the world, you can't revise it, you can't edit it, you can't change it and go, on second thought. No, with a novel, one of the things I love about it is that I do like to take my time. I mean, Twitter has done some very powerful things, absolutely, but I like to take my time. I like to traffic in sort of nuance. I mean, I have joked to an interviewer somewhere that in this time of hot takes, I want to be a master of the warm take. A novel can be warm. I don't mean like cuddly warm, but not like in the moment of heat. Sometimes you can write in the moment of heat, but then you revise later on usually, and you say, did I say what I meant? Did I say it in the most powerful way? Is it true to those characters? I think novels are very, very important, particularly in difficult times, politically difficult times. What they do is they don't offer solutions generally, but they show us how we live, how people live, and I think that's a very powerful thing because there's a real empathy deficit in the world. The cruelty that people are showing to people whose lives they don't understand is just staggering. And I think what a novel can do is say, this is how someone else lives. They're a person. This heart beats inside this person. And I think novels can change minds, but not always in the ways that we think. A novel isn't a political tract. It's not like a pamphlet that somebody's going to hand you on the street to tell you how to vote or how to believe. I don't think it does that. What I want to do is show people and make them feel real, and then their feelings are real, and then you're like, oh, there are people who are not me. Well, look at Margaret Atwood. She was one of the loudest, earliest voices that I saw of a writer on Twitter in such a big way, and she remains that. And I think that she's brought so many people of different generations to her work and to important ideas. You never know how to sort of influence other people. Social media certainly is one way to do it, but for me, young people are bombarded every day by all kinds of people and messages and words. It's finding the ones that really hit home, that really speak truth to them, that I think stick. Things that are true really last. Activism is a great idea, actually, but it means something different to different people. How are you an activist? You might be an activist by getting people signed up to vote. You might be an activist by going to speak to young students. by being a writer, by giving public speeches. One of the things that's happened in the US since the election of Donald Trump is that women have started flooding politics. And that could really change things. But I think the word activist can really mean different things to different people. Anger has an important place. My friend, the writer Rebecca Traister, whose book Good and Mad came out in the US, is about the political power of anger and the uses of anger in a positive way. But I don't think that anger and reflectiveness are necessarily opposites at all. For me, what I like to do is sit and write and think. That is very reflective. But then the book comes out, and it's so funny because something that you take 3 years to write comes out and people can read it in a couple of days, or a speed reader in an hour, who knows. But there it is. It's got a much more fast moving feeling than something that you took a long time to write. I think books can be both reflective and politically powerful. I know that this book is about female power, misogyny, and the person that you might meet who sees something in you and changes your life. I think that it's not a pamphlet that somebody would hand you on the street to try to change your mind. I don't write that way, I don't write for that reason. But I do know that novels that I have loved, when they stay with you for a while, the ideas in them sometimes really rise to the top, even though they can't just be there like in a pamphlet telling you how to vote or how to feel. They're often through character, they're often through the sensibility of the book, they're often through the beauty of language or the power of speech, and then you sort of give it your own self, your own experience too. It's almost like there's a relationship between the reader and the writer. The truth is going to be different for different people. One of the things that's happened in recent days with Me Too is the idea that things that happen to you, and I don't just mean sexual assault, but ways that women feel they've been treated or that the world has been, or things that people have said to them, can be taken seriously, are being taken seriously and listened to in a different way. And much of that is about speaking what's true. And if what's true is emotional, why would you not be emotional? I mean, I think that when we are most real, I think that there's something very powerful in that. I guess personally, I don't separate them out, but I know what you're saying. Maybe there's different rules that people tell political leaders to follow. But I think doing good work, staying focused on what you care about, you will convince people through your passion and through what you feel is true. To me, I've written about power both in The Wife and in The Female Persuasion. In The Wife, it was more about male power and female complicity with the power. And in The Female Persuasion, it's about female power in the world, and about people giving permission to other people. The older woman in this book, the feminist, gives permission to the young woman. Power is a transient thing. It slips away, it changes, but in the grip of it, people sometimes feel this is it, this will last. And I guess I wanted to sort of stand back and not take a view, but just sort of look at how people get very, very excited around certain ideas and what do they miss, what are they blind to? No, we're not. I mean, and look at, when I look at the election, the presidential election, the rules were really different for Hillary Clinton than they were for him. There were ways that she was mocked for speaking. The word shrill is often leveled at women who sort of are speaking with passion publicly. And until we move beyond certain old tropes of how women are meant to be and how men are meant to be, that when men are loud, they're forceful. When women are loud, they're like your mother or a teacher you didn't like. There's some of that in the air, in the news. You could hear that even in cultural critics sort of responding that way. It's very sexist. Look, there's a lot to do. I mean, sexual violence around the world. There's so many things that still need to be done. Even as the world has changed in a lot of ways, there's not one prescription to have women in power, but I do think, going back to something I said a little earlier, the fact that women have been flooding politics really will we will see a change. You know, we had a very hopeful midterm election in 2018, and women entering politics and being told you can speak up more. Let's see what happens. But sure, you know, this is one thing that I've learned. I mean, when I was growing up and I witnessed the women's movement, second wave feminism, I saw my mother, be very affected by it. She's 89 now, she's a novelist, and she hadn't been to university. Her parents didn't think it was important for her to go, and she became a writer, sort of self-taught. But there were headlines, a headline of a review of her book, her first novel, that said, "Housewife turns into novelist," which was very condescending, because it suggests, what? How could a housewife be a novelist? I think I thought back then, when I was a child, that everything would be fixed. Equal pay, and you know, and of course, that's not the case. And I think that what happened with this election is that it sharpened the idea, many ideas, but one of them for me, the idea that there was always going to be something to do. And there would be highs and there would be lows. But I didn't know that the whole thing could be sort of ripped out from under you, like that magic trick with the tablecloth that a magician does, you know, pulls everything out. There is work to do, but there's reason to, you can see progress in certain ways, but then there's slippage, and it's kind of crazy. Who knows what's even happened while I've been sitting here talking to you? The world is whirling right now. We're at the beginning, at this moment, of a new moment, and I don't know what it's going to look like in a few years. I don't think anybody can know. Well, you know, I wrote a whole essay about this topic called The Second Shelf, and it was in the New York Times Book Review in 2012, and it got a lot of attention because I was talking about some of these things, and one of the things I talked about in the essay was the different ways that literary male writers and female writers are treated. And one of the things was the book covers. And you would have a book by a man that would have giant letters, and it sort of seemed to suggest this book is a big event. And then you might have a book by a woman with what I jokingly called Little Girl in a Field of Wheat on the cover. Or later on I saw women in water, kind of like mermaids in water. And they were subtly, or not subtly really, giving messages that the book for men, well, that the book by men was for men and women, but that it was about powerful things. And the other one was just for women, and it's like, men, you don't need to come here. You don't need to read this. This is just women's business. And I reject that completely. My books don't look like that, but you know, but they're also very beautiful looking too. I love the Italian edition of this book. I think that books are for everyone, and the idea of keeping people out, or you know, sort of keeping men away. I mean, reading fiction increases someone's capacity for empathy, according to a study that was very excitedly reported on in the New York Times some years ago. Because don't you want to know how other people live? And I think for women to hear about men's lives, and for men to hear about women's lives, or even for men to hear about other men's lives, people in other parts of the world, in different societies, with different classes. I mean, that's what fiction does. It takes you outside of yourself and into another world. So I think there definitely has been a different treatment. In fact, my novel, The Wife, is about this, actually. And the movie with Glenn Close, but the husband is a big male writer, and he's one of those big sort of mid-century novelists who everybody wants to hear his opinion, and there's his wife just on the sidelines, and nobody has sort of wanted her opinion. And it's about really kind of thematically tying all of this in. It's sort of about who gets to have a voice. I think that's a very important thing in this world right now. Who gets to have a voice? Who gets to speak? And who's going to listen?
Exactly. That's all.